For my 40th wedding anniversary, I expected everything, but not this. In the closet where I hide blankets, I found a box, and in it was a luxurious gold wedding ring. John never gave me anything. He said that he was not made for gifts. And here is a romantic one. I was looking forward to our dinner. He sent a message. You didn't forget. Tonight at PM at our favorite place. The best dress, gorgeous makeup, and the most exquisite shoes. But already at the entrance to the restaurant, where he met me, I realized that something terrible had happened. The waiter led us to our table. John sat down very close, began to stroke my hand. Honey, we need to break up. He fell in love with another woman. I was so shocked that I couldn't squeeze out anything except, is that engagement ring for her? Yes. We want to get married in May. Who is she? My assistant Susan. You mean our daughter's classmate and friend? I asked. Yes. She's half my age, but this is love. Do you understand? These words made me start to shake. My hand reached for the bottle of chilled champagne. I poured myself a glass, but instead of drinking it, I poured it in his face. He said, I know I've caught a cold, but it'll be better this way. He begged me for one thing. Sign the divorce papers and I'll give you $1 million. I said, $2 million and you move out of the house. He agreed. My mother always told me, Angela, redheads are lucky. I don't know if that's what my happiness was then. I got millions, but I lost my husband, my lover, my friend, my family. Although what kind of friend is he to me if he slept with another woman behind my back? I'd like to tell you I stood up in that restaurant like a movie heroine and delivered a speech that made every fork stop midair. But the truth is I floated out of there the way you float after a car accident alive, technically, but not exactly inside your body. I remember the hostess saying, have a wonderful evening, and I remember thinking, I hope your mascara runs into your soup, which is petty, yes, but petty is the little sister of grief, and she shows up early with a casserole and no manners. The parking lot smelled like exhaust and rain. My phone kept buzzing because John was already texting logistics like we were moving office furniture instead of dismantling a life. I sat behind the wheel of my SUV and stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. The makeup was perfect. The dress was perfect. My face looked like a woman who had been carefully wrapped and presented to the universe, only for the universe to say, no thank you, I'm returning this. When I got home, the house greeted me the way it always did, quiet, too loyal, like a dog who doesn't understand why you're leaving again. John had already packed a duffel bag, the audacity of it sitting by the bedroom like a casual weekend trip. He had the nerve to leave the pantry stocked too, as if groceries were an apology. The living room still held our framed family photo, me, John, our daughter Lily at 16, braces and Hope, the three of us sunburnt at the Jersey Shore. I stood in front of that picture and felt something inside me go brittle. Not broken, brittle. There's a difference. Broken things fall apart. Brittle things stay intact until someone touches them, then they shatter into glittering shrapnel that gets into your socks. I locked myself in my bedroom for half the day, the way a child hides in a closet during a thunderstorm, convinced silence can negotiate with pain. I pulled the quilt up to my chin, yes, the quilt from the blanket closet, the one that smelled faintly of lavender and old summers, and I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan that needed dusting, because my brain kept insisting on ordinary tasks as if I could outclean betrayal. Every few minutes, my body tried to do something sensible. Drink water, breathe, sit up. Every few minutes, my heart did something stupid. Imagine John walking in with red eyes and regret, saying he'd made a mistake. The romantic ring, the message, 7 p.m. our favorite place. It was cruel how theatrical he'd been about it, like he needed the universe to witness his performance. At noon my phone rang. Lily. My finger hovered over the screen. I loved my daughter so much it hurt ironically, the one hurt in my life I'd always considered worth it. I answered anyway, because a mother can be bleeding and still instinctively reach for the child-shaped bandage. Mom, she said, cautious, like she was approaching an injured animal. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her I'd been humiliated at a table where we'd celebrated birthdays, promotions, anniversaries, and now the end of my dignity. But the first thing that came out of me was, did you eat? Mom, she sighed, and there it was, my own daughter sounding older than me. Dad texted me. I swallowed. Your father texts people now. Miracles do exist. Please don't do that, she said, which was her way of saying, please don't make this mess harder for me. I understood. I also hated it. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes when your child tries to manage your feelings like you're a fragile object. He says you agreed, Lily continued. That you're being reasonable. Reasonable. As if I'd negotiated with a mugger at gunpoint and they wanted to compliment my diplomacy. Yes, I said softly. I'm the picture of reason. $2 million and he moves out. Lily's breath caught. Mom, are you okay? I stared at the ceiling fan again. Of course I'm okay. I lied. The way women have lied for centuries while holding up entire families with one hand and their own hearts with the other. I'm a redhead. We're lucky. After I hung up, I did what I hadn't done at the restaurant. I cried. Not pretty tears either. I cried like a faucet you can't turn off, like the house had sprung a leak. My throat hurt. My chest hurt. I cried until my skin felt too tight for me. Then, in the middle of it, I started laughing, because my mind flashed to John's face when the champagne hit him, and I thought, at least the bubbly got to celebrate something. That's how it began, the grief and the laughter, taking turns driving me around my own brain like teenagers in a stolen car. At 3 p.m., Denise came over. Denise is 66, Italian, outspoken, and has a way of walking into a room like she's about to fix the plumbing and your attitude. She didn't knock. She never does. She walked straight into my bedroom like she had a key to my soul and a coupon for it. Ang, she announced. I brought food. I'm not hungry. Not negotiable, she said, and set a container on my dresser. Chicken parm. If you don't eat, you'll faint. If you faint, I'll have to call your ex-husband. And I'd rather eat glass. I smiled in spite of myself. Thanks. She studied me, hair wild, mascara smudged, quilt wrapped around me like an emotional burrito, and then she said quietly, he's a fool. Careful, I murmured. You'll make me start crying again. Denise leaned against the doorframe. Good, cry. Then we'll do something else. Because you are not dying in this bed like a Victorian heroine. You're from New Jersey. You'll haunt people aggressively. I laughed, a real one this time, and it startled me how it didn't feel like betrayal to laugh. It felt like oxygen. By 4 p.m., Marlene texted. On my way. Marlene is 62 and looks like she came out of a magazine called Women Who Always Have Mints. She's organized, polite, and quietly dangerous in the way librarians are dangerous. She remembers everything you've ever said, and she knows how to find your weaknesses without raising her voice. At 5, Carol called. Carol is 65, widowed, and the kind of woman who took up kickboxing after her husband died, not because she wanted to fight but because she didn't want the world to mistake her softness for surrender. So yes, I had 3 friends, and I was lucky enough to have them. My mother was right, in a way. Redheads are lucky. We just don't always like what luck looks like at first. They gathered in my kitchen around 6 p.m., the way a jury gathers, except this jury already knew the verdict. John was guilty. Denise poured wine without asking. Carol opened my fridge and made a face at the healthy yogurt John liked, then threw it in the trash with theatrical disgust. Marlene sat down at the table, folded her hands and said, Angela, talk. So I did. I told them everything. The box in the blanket closet, the ring that gleamed like an insult, the message, the restaurant, the champagne, the $1 million, the $2 million, the way John's hand had stroked mine while he stabbed me politely. When I finished, Denise slammed her palm on the table so hard my salt shaker jumped. Susan, she said, spitting the name like a seed. Susan is a child. She's 22, I murmured. Carol's eyes flashed. That is not love. That is a midlife crisis wearing lip gloss. Marlene, ever the calm one, said, what's your plan? I blinked. I don't know. I think my plan is to stay in my bedroom until I become a myth. Denise leaned in. Wrong plan. Marlene nodded. You need a psychologist. A good one, Carol added gently, or at least a support group. Meditation, breathing, something. I stared at them, the concern in their eyes, and something inside me rebelled because their kindness was real, and it made the betrayal feel even uglier by comparison. No, I said, firmer than I expected. Not right now. I don't want to sit in a beige office and cry into tissues while someone tells me to honor my feelings. I want to honor my feelings by what? Denise demanded. I stood up so suddenly my chair scraped the floor. By going to Vegas. There was a pause so perfect I could have framed it. Carol's mouth opened. Marlene's eyebrows climbed. Denise stared like she was trying to decide if I'd finally lost my mind or found it. Vegas? Marlene echoed slowly. Yes, I said, and the word tasted like rebellion. We are going to Las Vegas. We are going to celebrate my divorce like it's my birthday and my jailbreak on the same day. We are going to wear sparkly things and eat expensive food and sleep in clean hotel sheets that no man in my house has ever complained about. And if I cry, I will cry in a place where the lights are so bright no one can tell. Denise grinned first. Now that, she said, is a plan. Carol laughed, surprised and delighted. Angela, that's insane. Thank you, I replied. I've been reasonable for 40 years, Marlene sighed, the kind of sigh that meant she was already checking flights in her head. Fine, she said, but we are also doing one morning of meditation. Just one. It's non-negotiable. Deal, I said, because if there is anything I've learned in 64 years, it's that compromise is easier when you know exactly what you want: escape, glitter, and a little bit of myself back. 2 weeks later, we were in an airplane over the country, 4 women in our 60s traveling like teenagers who'd stolen their parents' credit card. Denise brought tiny bottles of champagne in her purse for emergencies, which felt both illegal and spiritually necessary. Carol had a playlist titled New Beginnings and played it loud enough that the young man in the seat ahead of us turned around twice, then finally smiled like he'd decided we were more charming than annoying. Marlene, of course, had printed itineraries, emergency contacts, and a small pharmacy's worth of pain relief in her carry-on. She handed me a lavender-scented sleep mask and said, for the plane, trauma makes people clench their jaw. I accepted it because she was right. I'd been clenching everything: jaw, shoulders, heart. I was tired. Not sleepy tired, soul tired. When the plane landed, Las Vegas hit me like perfume and heat. The air outside the airport smelled like pavement warming up and a promise you weren't sure you should trust. The taxi ride to our hotel rolled past palm trees and billboards, past a man dressed as a superhero taking pictures with tourists, past neon signs that looked like the city was constantly blinking at you, saying, "Come closer, make a mistake, it'll be fun." Our hotel lobby was marble and gold and money, the kind of place where the carpets look like someone designed them while drunk on luxury. Denise walked through it with her chin up like she belonged there. Carol kept spinning slowly, like she expected a camera crew to pop out and tell her she'd won something. Marlene was already checking the maps. I felt weirdly calm, like my grief had been temporarily confused by the architecture. Our room key opened a suite bigger than my first apartment. There was a view of the Strip, bright and shameless. Denise flopped onto the bed and said, Angela, if this place doesn't heal you, it will at least distract you long enough to remember you're still alive. That night, we went out, not cautiously, not sensibly. We went out like women who had spent decades being careful and were now tipping the scales back toward joy. Denise wore a red dress that hugged her like it was holding a secret. Carol wore sequins, actual sequins, like a disco ball with opinions. Marlene wore black, elegant and sharp, and looked like the CEO of Revenge. I wore a deep emerald dress that made my hair look like fire. I looked in the mirror and thought, John would have liked this. Then I thought, John can choke on a coupon. We ate at a restaurant where the menu didn't list prices, which is both terrifying and thrilling when you've spent your whole life checking the grocery budget. We toasted to new chapters, new beginnings, and at Denise's insistence, the death of mediocre men. Carol laughed so hard she snorted at one point, then slapped her own hand over her mouth in horror, then laughed harder because nobody in Vegas cares if you snort as long as you tip. After dinner, Denise dragged us into a casino. The sound hit first. The bells, the clinks, the electronic chimes, like 1,000 tiny invitations to make a questionable decision. The lights were bright enough to make time feel irrelevant. Somewhere a man yelled, "Let's go," as if he'd conquered a mountain rather than won $50. I stood at the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. This place was built on hope and denial, on people believing the next pull, the next card, the next spin would change everything. I'd been living in a marriage like that, hadn't I? Waiting for John to become generous, waiting for him to pick me in the way he hadn't, waiting for the next anniversary, the next dinner, the next favorite place to finally pay out. Carol touched my arm. You okay? I forced a smile. I'm fine. I'm just remembering I hate carpet patterns. Denise laughed. Good. Hate something trivial. It's progress. We started with slots because slots don't require strategy, just optimism and a little self-respect you're willing to gamble. Denise played like she was in a fist fight with the machine. Carol played like the machine was a friend who might surprise her. Marlene played with the calm seriousness of a surgeon. I sat down at a bright machine with tropical fruit on it, mangoes, pineapples, little cartoon fireworks. It was ridiculous. It looked like a vacation flyer. I fed it a 20. The machine chirped happily. I hit the button. Nothing. I hit again. Nothing. Angela, Denise said, don't let it intimidate you. It's a machine. It doesn't have feelings. Neither did my husband, I muttered, and that made them laugh. I kept pressing the button. 1 spin, 2, 3. Then the screen lit up like Christmas and the machine started singing, loud and triumphant, as if I'd personally rescued it from despair. The numbers on the screen climbed. Carol squealed. Denise leaned over me so fast she nearly knocked me off the stool. Marlene stood behind us with both hands over her mouth like she was watching a miracle. When it stopped, my credit balance read $2,450. I blinked. That can't be right. Denise smacked my shoulder. It's right. Redheads are lucky. You witch. Carol hugged me from the side. Oh my God, Angie. Marlene breathed out, stunned. Okay, maybe we don't need meditation. Maybe we need fruit machines. I laughed, the kind of laugh that shakes loose something tight inside you. I cashed out. The ticket felt warm in my hand, like a tiny proof that the universe still had room for surprises. We kept going. We danced through the casino like a small parade of women who refused to be invisible. We took pictures with a man dressed like Elvis who told Denise she had the best energy in the building. We walked into a lounge where a singer in a glitter jacket crooned old songs with new arrogance. And Carol cried quietly because it reminded her of dancing with her late husband in their kitchen. I held her hand. Denise pretended not to see the tears but ordered another round like she was protecting Carol with cocktails. Marlene leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "This is what healing looks like sometimes. Not quiet, not dignified, just alive." Later, around midnight, Denise insisted we go outside. Fresh air, she declared, as if Vegas had any. We stepped onto the sidewalk and the city roared around us, the strip glowing like a carnival. A man in a cowboy hat tried to hand me a flyer for something I didn't want to know about. I waved him off like a queen dismissing a messenger. And that's when I met Toby. He was standing near the entrance of our hotel, leaning against a pillar like he was waiting for someone who mattered. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that looked weathered in a good way, like he'd lived, not like he'd aged. He wore a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, and he had kind eyes that didn't slide past us the way most people's did. When Denise and Carol walked ahead, arguing about whether we needed pizza at 1 a.m, Toby's gaze landed on me and stayed there, polite but steady. "Rough day?" he asked. I snorted. "Rough life, but tonight's decent." He smiled, warm and a little amused. "That's a good trade. I'm Angela," I said, surprising myself. I hadn't introduced myself to a man outside of a work context in, what, a decade. My marriage had turned me into a woman who didn't bother being seen. "Toby," he said, "you here for fun or for trouble?" I looked at him. "Depends who you ask." He laughed softly. "You look like someone who deserves a little fun without the trouble." That should have made me flinch. Compliments did. Lately they felt like people were aiming at wounds. But Toby's voice didn't carry the slick hunger John's assistant Susan probably confused for love. Toby sounded like he wasn't trying to take anything from me. "Are you hitting on me?" I asked, because I've always preferred bluntness. It saves time. He lifted both hands slightly, mock surrender. "I'm talking to you. If it becomes flirting, you'll know, because I'll ask." That made me laugh. "Well, thank you for the warning." We talked for 5 minutes, maybe 10. He told me he was from Nevada, had been divorced a while, worked in logistics and delivery contracts, boring words that somehow didn't sound boring when he said them. He asked where I was from, and when I said New Jersey, he grinned. "Explains the posture," he said. "What posture?" "That try me stance," he said. "East Coast women stand like they've survived weather and men." Denise hollered from down the sidewalk, "Angela, pizza or tacos?" I turned back and called, "Both," then looked at Toby again. "My friends are trying to kill me with carbs." "Good friends," he said. "You look like you've had the kind of month where you need carbs and new memories." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "I have," I admitted, and I hated how small my voice sounded for a moment. Toby's gaze softened. "Then take the night. You don't owe anyone your sadness." I wanted to tell him, you don't know me. I wanted to tell him, you don't know what I lost. But the truth was, he didn't need to know in order to be kind, and that was what stunned me. I'd been living with a man who needed every detail of me to be convenient for him. Toby seemed to accept me as I was in that moment, a woman in emerald green, a little shattered, still standing. Before I walked away, he said, if you're still in town tomorrow, there's a little breakfast place off the strip that makes the best cinnamon French toast. Not fancy, just good. You and your friends should go. I raised an eyebrow. That's your line? That's my offer, he said. No pressure. I nodded, non-committal, because my heart-stupid thing had already started warming up to the idea of being invited somewhere without being manipulated into it. We'll see, I said. Back in the room that night, Denise insisted on pouring a celebratory drink. To Angela, she announced, who just got divorced and immediately won money and picked up a man. I did not pick up a man, I protested, laughing. Carol wiggled her eyebrows. He was handsome. I saw. Marlene, already in her pajamas, said calmly, just remember, rebound love is real love with terrible timing. I groaned. Nobody is rebounding. I am detoxing from betrayal. Denise raised her glass. Detox in Vegas, baby. The next morning, Marlene woke us up at 7 in Vegas. Meditation, she announced, standing by the curtains like a prison guard. Denise threw a pillow at her. Marlene, I will sue you. But we did it. We sat in a ridiculous circle in our suite, eyes closed, breathing like people who were trying not to think about what came next. The meditation app voice was soothing and smug. Let go of what you cannot control, it said, and I wanted to shout. I couldn't control my husband's morals either, apparently. Still, something happened as I breathed. My shoulders loosened, my stomach unclenched. My mind, usually a noisy courtroom, got quiet enough that a small, stubborn truth slipped through. John did this because of who he is, not because of who I am. That truth felt like a key turning in a lock. Afterward, we went to breakfast. And yes, we went to the place Toby recommended, because Denise declared, if the universe sends you French toast, you don't ignore it. The little restaurant was warm and simple, tucked away from the chaos. The cinnamon smell hit me like childhood. Toby wasn't there, thank God, because I wasn't ready to see him again and feel that strange pull. But the French toast was perfect, and Carol moaned dramatically after her first bite like she was in a romance novel with syrup. We spent the day doing everything John would have found a waste of time. We sat by the pool in oversized sunglasses, judging strangers with affection. We got massages. Denise flirted with the massage therapist until he blushed, which made her cackle like a witch. Carol bought a ridiculous hat. Marlene bought a tiny purse that could hold exactly one lipstick and a grudge. That night, we went to a show. Lights, dancers, feathers, the whole Vegas spectacle. At one point, the performers pulled audience members onto the stage, and Denise tried to volunteer me. She's newly divorced, Denise yelled. She needs a man with glitter. I refused with enough authority that a bouncer actually nodded at me respectfully. Good boundaries, he said, as if I'd just passed a test. By the third night, Vegas had done its job. It had cracked me open. Not in a tragic way, in a necessary way. I started to remember what it felt like to be curious, to be amused, to be someone other than wife. I started to feel the edges of myself again. And that's when the big win happened, the one that made my hands shake. We were back in the casino, and I'd switched from fruit machines to a table game because Carol insisted it was more dramatic. We ended up at a simple roulette table. I didn't understand all the bets, but I understood the wheel. It spins, it decides, it doesn't care about your heartbreak. Denise leaned in. Put 50 on red, she instructed. Marlene frowned. That's impulsive. Carol whispered, do it. For symbolism. I laughed and placed my chips. 50 on red. Then another 50, because if you're going to be symbolic, you might as well commit. The dealer spun the wheel. The ball danced. My heart did something ridiculous, like it remembered how to hope. When it landed on red, Denise screamed so loudly a man nearby spilled his drink. I blinked. Okay, I said, breathless. Again. We played again. Red again. Then again. The universe, apparently, was on my side, or maybe Vegas just loves a woman with vengeance in her bloodstream. By the time we finally stopped, my stack had climbed into something that didn't feel real. We cashed out at the counter. The number on the receipt made Carol gasp. $10,000. I stared at it. 10,000. A neat, bright number. Not life-changing, but spirit-changing. Proof that I could walk into a new chapter and still find sweetness, even if the last chapter had ended with champagne in a liar's face. Back in the suite, Denise made me hold the receipt like a trophy. Carol took pictures of us, all four of us smiling too wide, our eyes a little wet, like we'd stolen something back from time. That night, when the room finally quieted and the others fell asleep, I stood alone by the window and looked out at the strip. The lights pulsed, the city hummed, and for the first time since the restaurant, my thoughts weren't only about John. They were about me, about what I'd do with the money, about the house that was now mine in a different way, about how I didn't want my life to be a cautionary tale about a woman who got traded in for a younger model. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Toby. Hope you found good French toast. If you're still in town, I'd like to take you to dinner, no pressure. Just two adults talking. Toby. My first instinct was to ignore it. Of course it was. Because when you've been abandoned, kindness feels like a trick. I set the phone down and told myself, no, not now. I told myself, you are not a woman who needs saving. I told myself, you don't know how to trust anymore. But my heart again, stupid thing, didn't feel afraid. It felt interested, like a door that had been locked for years had just heard a familiar knock. I didn't answer him that night. I didn't answer the next morning either. We flew back to New Jersey with our suitcases heavier and our spirits strangely lighter. Denise was glowing in a way she hadn't before. She'd met a man at the show, a retired firefighter with a laugh like thunder, and she'd been texting him like a teenager. Carol, too, had a softness in her eyes. She'd danced with a gentleman at the lounge, and the way she spoke about him made me realize grief can coexist with desire. Marlene rolled her eyes at both of them but smiled when she thought we weren't watching. I was the only one who came home with my heart still in a locked box, and Toby's text still glowing on my screen like a dare. Back home, the divorce paperwork moved fast, because John wanted his May wedding like a man wants a shiny new toy, urgently, selfishly, without thinking about the wreckage left behind. The money landed in my account with a sterile little notification, as if $2 million could be delivered like a package. John moved out. The house echoed for a while. I kept catching myself listening for his footsteps, then feeling relieved when they didn't come. Lily came over once, standing in my kitchen with her arms folded like she was trying to hold herself together. Mom, she said carefully, Dad says you're being harsh. I laughed sharp. I'm being harsh? That's adorable. He says he's happy, she whispered, like she was confessing something shameful. I looked at my daughter, my sweet girl trapped between loyalty and reality, and I realized something painful. John wasn't only taking a young bride. He was trying to take the narrative too. He wanted to be the hero of his own story, even if he'd played the villain in mine. I started to build walls, not dramatic walls, quiet ones. I spent mornings in my bedroom again sometimes, the old instinct to hide returning like a bad habit. But then I'd remember Vegas. I'd remember the $10,000 in my hands. I'd remember Toby's calm eyes and his offer that didn't feel like a trap. I'd remember my own laughter, loud and unashamed, and I'd pull myself up. One afternoon, I opened the blanket closet again. The ring box was gone, of course. John had taken his little prop back, but the closet smelled like lavender and dust, and I stood there thinking, he used my own house as a hiding place for his betrayal. That kind of disrespect isn't just romantic, it's territorial, like marking a space that was never his to claim. That was the day I did something small but important. I changed the locks, all of them, every door, every handle, every way he'd ever had access to me. That night, my phone buzzed again. Not Toby, Lily, a video. Her message underneath was short. Mom, look how happy he is. Don't be angry with Dad. Let him go. You should be happy with someone else too. My fingers went cold. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the couch in the quiet house, the blue light of my phone reflecting off my emerald nail polish like a warning. Then I pressed play, and there he was, John, in a suit, smiling like a man who hadn't detonated 40 years of someone else's life. Susan beside him in white, glowing with youth and delusion. People clapping, music swelling, my daughter filming, her voice trembling as if she was trying to convince herself this was fine. I stopped the video halfway through, because my stomach turned. Not because I wanted John back. God, no, because the cruelty of it was so casual. Happiness built on someone else's humiliation should come with at least a little shame. shouldn't it? But he looked proud. I sat there, breathing, feeling the old tremor rise in my hands. Then I remembered something Vegas had taught me. Pain wants to turn you into a statue. Joy wants to turn you into a woman again. I opened my closet and pulled out my most beautiful dress, the one I'd worn to a gala years ago, back when John still pretended to admire me in public. I laid it on the bed like an altar cloth. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long moment and said out loud, to my own reflection, Angela, you are not an abandoned woman. You are a woman with a future, and you are done waiting for permission to live it. My phone buzzed once more. This time, it was Toby. I'm in New Jersey this week for a delivery run. Crazy coincidence. Dinner still stands if you want it. If not, I'll wish you well from a respectful distance. I stared at the message, my heart thudding like it remembered how to beat for something besides survival, and I heard Denise's voice in my head, detox in Vegas, baby. I heard Marlene's voice, healing isn't always quiet. I heard Lily's words, you should be happy with someone else too. I picked up my lipstick. I took a breath. And I started typing. Source link. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard like they were waiting for a judge to bang a gavel. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, which is ridiculous because I've survived childbirth, parent-teacher conferences, and a mammogram technician who insisted on chatting about her cat while she flattened my dignity like a panini. Yet here I was, paralyzed by a text from a man who had done nothing wrong except exist at the wrong time in my life. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself I was protecting my heart. The truth was simpler and uglier. I'd spent 40 years training my feelings to sit down and stay, and now that they were standing up again, I didn't know where to put them. So I typed something safe, something controlled, something that didn't sound like I was starving for kindness. Dinner is fine, 1 hour, public place, no expectations. Angela. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Perfect. I'll make a reservation. And Angela, I'm glad you answered. I stared at that last line until my eyes stung. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He'd already said the thing nobody says to a woman after betrayal. I'm glad you're here. The day of John's wedding, I moved through the morning like an actress in a play whose script had been rewritten overnight. I made coffee. I watered the sad little herbs by my kitchen window. I folded laundry I didn't care about. I refused to open Lily's video again, because I didn't want his happiness to become my morning news. But it still sat behind my ribs like a stone, not because I missed him, because I hated the image of me he'd tried to leave behind, the discarded wife, the cautionary tale, the woman who should move on gracefully the way people say be quiet without admitting it. Around noon, Denise called and didn't bother with hello. Are you breathing? Barely. You going tonight? I pretended I didn't understand. Going where? On the date, Angela. The date with the silver fox. The one who looked at you like you weren't a problem to solve. I leaned my forehead against the kitchen cabinet. I don't know. Denise snorted. That's a lie. You know, you're just scared of being a person again. I am a person. Right now you're a very expensive houseplant, she said. Get dressed. Go. Laugh. If you cry, cry into bread. Restaurants have bread for a reason. After I hung up, I stood in front of my closet and stared at dresses like they were all accusing me of something. The emerald one from Vegas still smelled faintly of hotel shampoo and rebellion. The gala dress, my best beautiful dress, hung in the back like a memory John didn't get to touch anymore. I pulled it out and laid it on the bed. Then I sat beside it and told myself, out loud, Angela, don't do this to prove anything. Do it because you're alive. At 3 p.m., Lily texted, Mom, are you okay? No heart emoji. No, love you. Just the careful tone of a young woman trying to keep peace between two disasters. I answered, I'm okay. I love you. We'll talk soon. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Love can be real and still feel like a rope around your chest when the person you love is standing next to the one who hurt you. At 6:30, I put on the dress. The mirror showed a 64-year-old woman with hair like a flame and eyes that had seen too much and were still daring the world to try again. I did my makeup slowly, foundation, blush, mascara, like I was rebuilding a face out of ritual. When I finished, I stared at myself and said, if he tries to talk about your ex, you leave. If he tries to touch you without asking, you leave. If he makes you feel small, you leave. You've left enough things behind to know how. Then I walked out of my house and locked the door like I was sealing a chapter. Toby picked a restaurant that wasn't trendy, wasn't loud, wasn't full of people who would stare at us like we were an inspirational documentary. It was warm and dim and smelled like garlic and rosemary. When I walked in, he stood up immediately, instinctively, and something in my chest tightened, because John hadn't stood up for me in years unless there was an audience. Toby smiled. Angela, you look, wow. I gave him a look that could slice tomatoes. Careful. Compliments are fragile in my hands right now. He nodded like he respected the warning. Then I'll say this instead. I'm glad you came. We sat. The waitress brought water and bread, and I almost laughed because Denise's voice echoed in my head. Cry into bread. Toby didn't rush me. He didn't pry. He didn't pepper me with questions that felt like an interview. He asked about my day, and when I said, my ex got married, he didn't flinch or pretend it was nothing. He just said quietly, that's a lot to carry. I stared at my water glass. He married his assistant. Toby's mouth tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said, sharper than I intended. He did me a favor. He just did it with a knife. Toby didn't try to smooth it over. He didn't say, everything happens for a reason, which is the kind of phrase that makes me want to commit minor arson. He just said, you didn't deserve that. I looked up. You don't know what I deserve. I know betrayal isn't something you earn, he replied. It's something other people choose. That sentence hit me so hard I had to blink. Because it was the truth I'd tried to meditate myself into believing, and here it was, spoken plainly across a table by a man who had nothing to gain from saying it. We talked for 2 hours. About silly things, my hatred of carpet patterns, his love of old movies, the way New Jersey drivers treat stop signs like suggestions. About hard things, his divorce, my fear of trusting my own judgment. At one point I laughed so suddenly I startled myself, and Toby's face lit up like he'd been waiting for that sound. I like that, he said. What? My laugh? Yeah, he said. It sounds like you, not like a polite version you're performing. I looked down at my hands, my nails painted deep wine red. I've been polite for too long. He lifted his glass slightly. To impoliteness then. We clinked glasses, and the sound felt like a small bell ringing somewhere inside me. When he walked me to my car, he didn't touch me. He didn't lean in. He just stood close enough that I could feel his presence without feeling trapped. Thank you, he said, for trusting me with your time. I unlocked my car and paused. I didn't trust you. I just didn't want to sit in my house watching his wedding videos like it was my punishment. Toby smiled. That's still choosing yourself. I got in, then rolled down the window. Toby, yeah, if you try to fix me, I'll bite. His grin widened. Fair. I'm not looking for a project. I'm looking for a partner. I drove home with my heart doing something reckless, imagining a future. It didn't happen all at once. Love isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's a slow sunrise you don't notice until you're warm. Over the next month, Toby became a steady presence. He'd text good morning without expectation. He'd call at night and tell me a funny story about his day, then ask about mine like it mattered. He never demanded access to my grief. He waited for me to offer it. And I resisted him like a woman guarding a door she'd once left wide open and paid for. Denise thought it was hilarious. Angela, she said one afternoon over coffee, you're acting like affection is a scam call. It might be. I snapped. Marlene sipped her tea, calm as a judge. Or it might be the beginning of healing. Carol, soft-eyed, said, you don't have to punish yourself because your husband made a mess. I hated that they were right, because being right is inconvenient when you're trying to stay armored. Then one day, while I was driving home from the grocery store, I saw it, a small storefront for rent on a corner in town, sunlight spilling through the dusty windows, the sign crooked like it had given up. A ridiculous thought slid into my mind. What if I made something new here? Not a hobby, not keeping busy, something real, something mine. I pulled over without thinking. Inside, it smelled like old wood and forgotten ambition. The floors were worn, the back room was cramped, and there was a small counter that looked like it had seen better decades. But the space had bones. It had possibility. I stood in the center and pictured it: white walls, warm lighting, a display case full of cakes and cupcakes, a place where sweetness wasn't a consolation prize but a product I could hand to the world. I baked when I was stressed. I baked when I was happy. I baked when I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Over the years, I'd made Lily's birthday cakes, John's mother's anniversary cake, she'd called it nice and then asked for the recipe as if she'd earned it. Neighbor wedding cakes, baby shower cupcakes, cookies shaped like graduation caps. People always said, "Angela, you should sell these," and I always laughed it off because I'd been busy being a wife. Standing in that empty storefront, I realized something. Being busy being a wife had been my cage. That night, I called Toby. "Do you know anything about commercial leases?" There was a pause, then warmth in his voice. "I know enough to tell you not to sign anything before we read it." I asked, suspicious. He chuckled. "If you want, you can do it alone, but you don't have to." My throat tightened again, the way it always did when kindness tried to move in. "I'm thinking of opening a confectionery." "That's not thinking," he said. "That's dreaming out loud. I want to call it Angel Confectionery." Another pause. Then, "That's perfect." I used part of John's divorce money the way I should have used my last decade, deliberately. I hired a contractor. I painted the walls. I installed a glass display case that made me feel like a real businesswoman instead of a woman playing dress up. I bought mixers so powerful they sounded like small engines. I got permits, insurance, the whole glamorous parade of adult responsibility. And I worked. Lord, I worked. I woke at 4 in the morning because dough waits for nobody. I tested mango fillings until my tongue was numb from sugar. I experimented with pineapple treats that tasted like sunshine. I practiced frosting roses until my wrists cramped. I burned a batch of cupcakes and cried not because of the cupcakes, but because failure felt like it could still swallow me if I let it. Toby came by one evening and found me sitting on the floor behind the counter, staring at a ruined cake like it had personally betrayed me. He crouched beside me and said gently, "Tell me what happened." "I'm too old," I blurted. "That's what happened. I'm 64 and I'm starting over like an idiot." Toby didn't argue. He didn't say, "You're not old." He said something better. "You're 64 and you're brave enough to start over. That's not idiotic. That's rare." I sniffed. "It's also expensive." He smiled. "So is staying miserable." That was the first time I let him hold me, just for a minute. His arms around me felt like shelter without ownership. It scared me. It soothed me. It made me furious with John all over again for nearly convincing me this kind of safety didn't exist. Angel Confectionery opened on a bright Saturday in spring. Denise marched in first, wearing a hat she'd definitely bought in Vegas, and announced, "This is the sweetest revenge I've ever tasted." Carol cried at the sight of the sign with my name on it. Marlene hugged me hard and whispered, "You did it." The first customers came in curious, then left smiling. Word spread the way good news does, quietly at first, then everywhere. My 3-tiered wedding cakes became my signature: vanilla bean with raspberry filling, chocolate with salted caramel, lemon with blueberry compote. My baby shower cupcakes became little edible celebrations. Cafes around town started placing orders. A restaurant called asking if I could supply desserts for their weekend menu. I said yes so quickly my voice squeaked, then hung up and danced alone in my kitchen like a lunatic. It wasn't just money. It was identity. It was proof. When you've been left, part of you wonders if you were ever valuable outside the role someone assigned you. My pastries answered that question with frosting and receipts. Toby, true to his logistics background, offered to help with deliveries. "I can handle routes," he said. "You focus on baking." I raised an eyebrow. "You're trying to insert yourself into my business." He lifted his hands. "I'm trying to support your dream without stepping on it. But if you say no, I'll stop." I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, you can deliver, but you don't get to taste test everything." He grinned. "That's a cruel boundary." Soon, Toby became part of the rhythm. He'd load boxes into his car like they were precious cargo, because to me they were. He'd come back and tell me what people said. "The cafe owner called your mango tart ridiculous in the best way," he'd report, and my chest would bloom with pride. He'd stand behind the counter sometimes, charming customers with calm friendliness, always introducing me like I was the star. "This is Angela," he'd say. "She's the one you should thank." And I started to believe him. Then John came back into my life like a bad smell you can't locate. It started with a phone call. I didn't recognize the number. I answered anyway because I was expecting a supplier. "Angela," John's voice said, hoarse. My spine went ice cold. "John." A pause, then a wheedling sigh. I need to talk to you." "No," I said immediately. "Please," he insisted. "It's important." "Is it about Lily?" My chest tightened. That was his only leverage. "No," he said quickly. It's about me." Of course it was. Then no, I repeated. He swallowed audibly. Susan, things are complicated. I laughed sharp. Susan is complicated? That's funny. She looked pretty uncomplicated in the wedding video. Angela, he said, and I could hear the old tone creeping in, the one he used when he wanted me to manage his emotions. She's changed. She spends money. She's angry all the time. She says I'm old. I closed my eyes. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. So you married a woman half your age and now you're shocked she notices your age. He tried to pivot. I made mistakes. You made choices. Can we meet? He asked. Just to talk. I looked around my shop, filled with my work and my future, and felt something settle in me like a stone finding its place. You can come to the shop, I said, during business hours. In public. 10 minutes. He arrived the next afternoon looking smaller than I remembered. His suit was expensive but rumpled. His hair, once carefully combed, was unconvincingly neat. He stood at my counter like a man approaching a wild animal. Angela, he said softly, eyes flicking over the display case. This place is, wow. 10 minutes, I reminded him. He nodded quickly, then leaned in. Susan emptied our joint account. I blinked. Your joint account? She said it's hers now, he whispered, like he was confessing a crime done to him instead of one he'd committed to me. I waited. Silence is a wonderful weapon. It makes liars fill the space. She's cruel, he added. She insults me. She says I'm boring. She doesn't appreciate anything I did for her. I tilted my head. Sounds like love. Do you understand? His face flushed. Don't do that. Don't do what? Repeat your own words. I leaned forward slightly. John. Why are you here? He swallowed again. I need help. There it was. The request hidden under all the complaints. What kind of help? Money, he admitted, then rushed. Not a lot. Just temporary. I'll pay you back. I stared at him. 40 years of my life sat between us like a wall. I thought of the ring in the blanket closet, the restaurant, the champagne, the assistant half his age, the way he'd expected me to sign away my life for $1 million like I was a business expense. I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just clearly. Don't ask me for money, sympathy, or love. You have made your choice. I don't respect traitors. I would have broken up with you then even without money. Because betrayal is a conscious choice. Let your daughter help you. She knows better how to deal with a friend. John's jaw tightened. You're enjoying this. I shrugged. No, I'm educating you. You owe me, he began. I cut him off so cleanly it felt like slicing a thread. I owe you nothing. You already took 40 years. You don't get an encore. His face twisted. You think you're better than me now because you sell cupcakes? I glanced at the display case. Not cupcakes. Mango and pineapple treats, actually. People love them. The humiliation hit him like a slap. He looked around, seeing customers in line, seeing my confidence, seeing a life continuing without him. His eyes narrowed, and in that moment I recognized something uglier than regret, jealousy. Not of Toby, not even of my money. Jealousy that I'd survived, that I hadn't stayed a ruin he could point to and call proof of his importance. He leaned closer. You'll regret turning me away. I smiled again, still calm. Your 10 minutes are up. John left with his pride bleeding out behind him, and I watched him go without shaking. That was new. That was me rebuilt. 2 weeks later, the rumors started. At first it was small. A customer wrinkled her nose and said, my cousin heard you had issues. A cafe owner called and asked awkwardly, you don't have pests, do you? Because someone said. I laughed it off. Because people say things. People gossip. People are bored. Then it escalated. A woman I didn't recognize came in, ordered a slice of cake, and made a face after one bite like she'd tasted something obscene. This is disgusting, she announced loudly. Heads turned. I found something in it. My stomach dropped. What did you find? She held up a tiny object between her fingers. A dark speck. A cockroach, she said, loud enough for the entire shop to hear. Silence slammed down. I walked around the counter slowly, my pulse roaring. May I see it? She hesitated a fraction of a second too long, then handed it to me like she was granting an audience. I held it up to the light. It didn't look like a cockroach. It looked like something dried and staged. My mouth went dry. Marlene had taught me something years ago when we volunteered at a community fundraiser and someone tried to accuse her of stealing money from the donation box. If you panic, she'd whispered, you become the story. If you stay calm, you become the problem they can't solve. So I stayed calm. I'm sorry you're upset, I said evenly. I take food safety seriously. I'm going to close the case for a moment and check everything. I'll refund you, and I'll also ask you to wait while I call the health department myself to request an inspection. The woman's eyes flickered. That wasn't what she expected. People who lie expect you to either beg or explode. They don't expect you to invite authorities. I don't have time for that, she snapped. I do, I replied pleasantly. She stormed out, leaving the rumor behind her like a stink bomb. I locked the door, hands steady even though my insides were trembling. Then I did what John never expected me to do. I built a file. I documented everything. Dates, names, times, phone calls. I reviewed my security camera footage. I called my pest control company for a proactive inspection and a written report. I called the health department and asked for an inspection. The inspector arrived 2 days later, walked through my spotless kitchen, checked my storage, examined my ingredients, and nodded. You're clean, he said. Better than most places. I could have cried with relief. Instead I said, can you put that in writing? He smiled, already doing it. Then came the fake buyer. A man in his 40s came in wearing a baseball cap and impatience. He ordered a slice of my almond cake, one of my best sellers, and ate it too fast, like he didn't even taste it. Then he jerked back dramatically, clutching his mouth. Ow, what the? Customers froze. He spat into a napkin and held it up. A nutshell, he said, voice rising. I broke my teeth. My heart slammed. Almond cake has nuts, yes, but nutshells? No, my supplier delivered blanched almonds, clean, shelled, ready. He started to shout louder, demanding my name, demanding compensation, threatening lawsuits. I saw phones lift. I saw faces turn into the hungry expressions people get when they smell drama. This was how reputations died now, not with facts but with spectacle. I stepped out from behind the counter and held up my hands. Sir, I'm sorry you're in pain. Let's handle this properly. Properly as you paying me, he barked. I kept my voice even. If you were injured, I want you to get medical care. I will pay for an evaluation at urgent care or a dentist. Right now, we can go together if you need help. And I'll need to keep the slice you ate, the napkin, and the remaining cake for analysis. Also, because this is serious, I'm going to review our security footage and file an incident report. He blinked. Just once, but it was enough. He hadn't expected process. He'd expected panic. I don't need urgent care, he muttered. If you broke to teeth, I said gently. You do. His face flushed. I'll sue you. You're welcomed, I replied calmly. And I'll provide my sanitation reports, ingredient invoices, and camera footage. His eyes darted toward the door. This is ridiculous, he snapped, and shoved past a waiting customer, escaping like a man who'd realized the stage was lit too bright. After the door closed, the shop exhaled. People murmured. Someone whispered, wow. I turned back to the counter and realized my hands were shaking, but my voice hadn't. That mattered. That was the difference between the old Angela and the new one. That night, Toby found me in the kitchen after closing, sitting on a stool, staring at my incident notes like they were a war map. He didn't speak at first. He just stood behind me and placed his hands lightly on my shoulders. Bad day? He asked softly. I laughed. Brittle. Somebody is trying to bury me in cockroaches and lawsuits. Toby's hands tightened slightly. Who? I have a guess, I said, and the words tasted like ash. John. Toby went still. Your ex, yes, I said. He came asking for help. I said no, now he's punishing me. Toby's jaw clenched. That's predictable, I interrupted. He needs to believe he can still control the story. Toby crouched beside me so his eyes were level with mine. Angela, this is your story. I stared at him. What if he wins? Toby's voice went low and steady. Then we fight smarter. We didn't fight with fists. We fought with facts, community, and a little bit of strategic sweetness. Marlene, who had once run a PTA fundraiser like a military operation, took one look at my documentation and said, good. Now we build a reputation wall. Denise recruited customers the way she recruited friends, loudly and aggressively. She marched into cafes I supplied and announced, if anyone tells you Angela has cockroaches, tell them I will personally bring a magnifying glass and a lawsuit. Carol, quietly, posted on the local community page photos of my spotless kitchen, my health inspection report, my ingredient sourcing, my food safety practices. She wrote it without drama, just truth. People shared it. People commented. People defended me. Because people are tired of bullies when someone gives them a clear target to stand against. And then I did the boldest thing. I hosted an open kitchen day. I put up a sign. Tour our kitchen. Ask any questions. Watch us bake. I offered tiny samples. I let people see with their own eyes. The line out the door made me dizzy. That afternoon, a woman who'd been skeptical at first watched me pipe frosting onto cupcakes and said, "You know, my brother told me rumors, but this is the cleanest place I've ever seen." I smiled. Rumors are cheap. Butter isn't. She laughed and bought a dozen. John's smear campaign didn't just fail, it backfired. People started whispering the opposite story. That someone was trying to sabotage me because I'd become successful. That I was the wronged wife who didn't collapse. That my shop was the place with the amazing mango tarts and the brave owner. Then the real surprise arrived. A letter from an attorney representing the fake buyer. He was claiming damages. 2 broken teeth, medical bills, emotional distress, the whole circus. For one terrifying moment, I felt the old panic claw up my throat. Lawsuits are expensive, stressful, public, and even if you're right, the process can bruise you. Marlene took the letter, read it, and looked up with a calm that made me want to worship her. "Good," she said. "Good." I squeaked. "Yes," she replied. "Now we get to subpoena." I blinked. "We get to what?" Marlene smiled thinly. "We get to ask for evidence. Dental records, photos, proof. And you have camera footage." My security cameras became my guardian angels. The footage showed the man entering, eating fast, and this part was key, reaching into his pocket before clutching his mouth. It was subtle, but it was there. A small movement, a staged moment. Toby helped me find a lawyer, one who specialized in small business defense and did not look amused by theatrics. Her name was Priya Patel, and she had the sharpest eyes I'd ever seen. She watched the footage once and said, "He planted it. Can we prove that?" I asked. Priya tapped her pen. "We can prove inconsistencies. We can show you acted responsibly. We can request his dental records and incident timeline. And we can follow the money." "Follow the money?" I echoed. Priya's smile was all teeth. "People who run scams often get paid." The legal process unfolded like a slow, tense movie. My stomach lived in knots for weeks. I baked through it anyway because baking is what I do when my life is on fire. I make sugar behave. Customers kept coming. Orders kept growing. But every time my phone buzzed, I braced for disaster. Then Priya called one afternoon and said, "Angela, are you sitting down?" I sat. "We found something," she said. My mouth went dry. "What?" "The fake buyer has a history," Priya continued. "Similar claims, different businesses, same pattern. And this is the best part, our subpoena request showed a payment from a third party to his account right before your incident." My heart thudded. "Who?" Priya paused for dramatic effect because she was a professional and she earned it. "A payment from an LLC linked to John's new wife's family." My brain struggled to catch up. "Susan's family?" "Yes," Priya said. "And we also found texts. The fake buyer thought he was being paid to teach a lesson. He bragged about it to a friend who was subpoenaed." People are incredibly stupid when they think they're clever. I stared at the wall, stunned. "So it was John, but through Susan. Or Susan through John," Priya said. "Either way, we have enough to counterclaim for defamation and business interference." My hands started shaking, not from fear this time, from vindication, from the cold thrill of truth sharpening into a weapon. When John was served with the counterclaim, he showed up at my shop again like a man walking into a courtroom he didn't expect. His face was red. His eyes were wild. "You did this," he hissed. I stood behind my counter, wearing my apron like armor. Toby was in the back room, silent but present. Priya had advised me to keep interactions minimal, but I wanted one moment, one clean moment where he saw me not as an ex-wife, but as the consequence of his choices. "You did this," I corrected calmly. "You tried to ruin my business." "I didn't," he began, but his voice faltered. "Because denial is harder when paperwork exists." I tilted my head. "Was it your idea or Susan's?" His jaw clenched. She's furious about you." I laughed, genuinely amused. "She should be furious at herself. She married a man who hides rings in closets and then cries when the woman he betrayed refuses to rescue him." John's eyes flicked toward my display case, toward the line of customers, toward the bustling life. "You think you've won," he said, bitterness dripping. I leaned forward just slightly. "I have won. Not because you lost money, because you lost me." His face twitched, and I saw it: real regret, buried under ego and rage. It was too late. Regret is not a time machine. It's just a bruise. You're heartless. He spat. No, I said softly. I'm healed. He stormed out, and the bell above the door jingled cheerfully like it was mocking him. The court process didn't drag the way I feared. With the evidence of payment, the fake buyer's history, the inspection reports, my open kitchen day documentation, and the security footage, the case collapsed like a badly baked souffle. The fake buyer's attorney withdrew. A settlement was offered, pre-negotiated terms that included a formal retraction, a written apology, and damages for lost business during the smear weeks. I didn't become a millionaire again. I didn't need to. What I needed was the record to show what really happened. And then, because life enjoys irony, Susan left John. I heard it from Lily first. She came into my shop one afternoon when it was quiet, her eyes tired, and said, "Mom, Dad is staying at a hotel." I didn't gloat, not in front of my daughter, but I did let myself feel something like relief. The universe wasn't fair, but sometimes it was poetic. "Why?" I asked gently, keeping my voice neutral. Lily exhaled. Susan took what she wanted: money, gifts, trips. Then she got bored. She said, "Dad is too old and too needy." There it was again. The phrase, too old, too needy. The same cruelty he'd used on me, handed back to him in a younger voice. Lily looked at me, and for the first time in months, her eyes softened with something like apology. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know it would be like this." I reached across the counter and took her hand. "Honey," I said, "you didn't cause it. But you do need to learn something." She blinked. "What?" "You don't ask people to forgive betrayal just because it makes life easier," I said quietly. "You don't tell your mother to let him go when she's bleeding. You can love your father and still hold him accountable. Those things can exist together." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to keep everyone okay." I squeezed her hand. "I know, but you're not responsible for holding up the whole world." "That was my job for a long time, and it almost broke me." She nodded, tears slipping down. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Everyone talks about your shop." I smiled, and this time it didn't hurt. "Good," I said. "Let them talk." That night, after closing, Toby and I sat in the little back room of Angel Confectionery, surrounded by boxes and flour bags and the quiet hum of refrigerators. He was scrolling through delivery requests on his phone, brow furrowed in concentration like he was planning a military campaign. "You're thinking," I observed. He looked up. "I'm thinking you're going to need a second delivery day next week. Orders are up." I exhaled, amazed. "I never thought. I hoped." But Toby's eyes warmed. "You built something people want. That's not luck. That's you." I stared at him, feeling that slow sunrise again. "Toby?" "Yeah." "What do you want?" I asked, because I needed to know. Not because he'd ever pressured me, but because I needed to hear it out loud, to prove to myself that wanting wasn't a trap. He set his phone down. "I want to be in your life," he said simply, "in a way that feels safe for you. I want to grow old with someone who still believes in starting new chapters." My throat tightened. "I'm already old." Toby shook his head. "No, you're seasoned." I laughed. "That's just a nicer word." "It's a truer word," he said. Then he reached across the table and took my hand gently, waiting. "Angela, you don't have to punish yourself by refusing happiness." I looked at our hands, his steady, mine flour dusted and strong, and something inside me cracked open in the best way. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know," he said. "I don't want to need someone again." "You don't have to need me," Toby replied. "Just choose me." Sometimes. The tears came, then quiet, controlled, not the drowning kind. The kind that arrives when you realize you've been holding your breath for years and finally you can exhale. I squeezed his hand back. "Okay," I whispered. "Sometimes." 2 months later, he proposed in the least dramatic, most perfect way. No crowd, no flash mob, no kneeling in a public place to force my yes. He did it after we finished a big wedding cake order: 3 tiers, white buttercream, delicate sugar flowers, and we stood together in my kitchen at midnight, exhausted and proud. He looked at me, hair mussed, flower on his sleeve, and said, "You built this. You built yourself back. And I love the woman you are now." My heart stuttered. "Toby." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Not a luxury gold ring hidden in a closet like a lie. Just a simple, elegant ring that looked like honesty. "I'm not asking you to forget what happened," he said. "I'm asking if you want to make something new with me." I stared at him, and my mind flashed to the restaurant, the champagne, the betrayal, the millions, the emptiness, the plane to Vegas, the $10,000, the first laugh I thought I'd never have again. I thought of Lily learning to see the truth. I thought of John's face when he realized he couldn't destroy me. I thought of my mother's voice. Redheads are lucky. I took the box from Toby's hand and held it, feeling the weight of it, not just metal, but choice. Yes, I said, but we're doing it my way. Toby's smile trembled. Name it. No secrets, I said. No hiding. No making me small to make you feel big. He nodded immediately. Done. And I added, because I'm still me, if you ever cheat, I'll bake your obituary into a cake and serve it at your next birthday. Toby laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. Fair, he said. Terrifying, but fair. We didn't rush into a wedding. We didn't need to prove anything to anyone. We just kept building our relationship, my business, my life. Angel Confectionery expanded. I hired a young baker who reminded me of myself at 25, eager, talented, terrified. I taught her that mistakes are not disasters, just ingredients you learn to handle. Cafes kept ordering. A local magazine did a feature on my shop titled something like Sweet Success, and I rolled my eyes but secretly framed it. One afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. My stomach tightened out of habit. When I opened it, I found a folded piece of paper with a typed message. You ruined him. You always ruin everything. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed, slow and satisfied, because whoever wrote it still believed I had the power to ruin men simply by refusing to save them. I walked into my shop, went to the back room, and dropped the paper into the shredder. The machine chewed it up into thin strips like confetti. I watched it disappear and felt something in me finally relax. Later that week, John came in again. Not angry this time, not threatening, just empty. He looked older. He looked like a man who'd spent his whole life assuming women were furniture, and now he was surprised the room didn't collapse when he left. Angela, he said quietly. I didn't move from behind the counter. John, he swallowed. I heard you're engaged. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't owe him my news. But I didn't want to be cruel either. Cruelty is cheap, and I'd built a whole business on sweetness. Yes, I said calmly, I am. His eyes flicked over me, and I could see him measuring what he'd lost. Not just my labor, not just my loyalty. Me, the version of me he never bothered to know. I'm sorry, he said, and I almost believed him. Almost. Are you sorry you hurt me? I asked softly. Or sorry it didn't work out for you? He flinched. Silence stretched. Finally he whispered, both. I nodded. That's at least honest. He looked down at the display case. Your cakes. They're beautiful. Thank you, I said. They're made with good ingredients and no lies. His face tightened. Then he exhaled. I don't have much left, he admitted. Susan took everything. I'm starting over. It's humiliating. I leaned forward slightly. Good, I said, not unkindly. Maybe humiliation will teach you empathy. Maybe starting over will teach you what you took for granted. He looked up, eyes bright with something like tears. Do you hate me? I considered it. Hate is heavy. Hate is a bag you drag around until your arms ache. I'd carried it for months, and it had served its purpose, kept me moving, kept me sharp. But I didn't need it anymore. No, I said honestly. I don't hate you. I just don't want you. His face crumpled, and that was the moment I knew I'd won. Not because he suffered, not because he begged, but because his power over me was gone. My life wasn't a reaction to him anymore. It was mine. He nodded slowly, like a man absorbing a truth he couldn't negotiate. I wish you well, he said, voice rough. I held his gaze, steady as stone. I know. He left without another word. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully behind him, as if the shop itself were saying goodbye. Don't come back. That evening, Toby arrived with a delivery tote and a grin. Big day? He asked. I smiled. You could say that. He set the tote down and looked around at the shop, the warm lights, the full display case, the little sign with my logo, an angel wing made of frosting swirls. You know, he said, this place feels like you. Strong and sweet and a little dangerous. I laughed. A little dangerous? Toby leaned in close. You threatened to bake my obituary. Fair point. He kissed my forehead, gentle. Angela, you did something most people never do. You took betrayal and turned it into a beginning. I leaned into him, letting myself be held without fear. I didn't do it alone, I admitted. No, he agreed. But you did the hardest part. You chose yourself. Later, when the shop was quiet and the streets outside were dark, I stood alone for a moment and looked at the reflection of my face in the glass display case. I saw the lines, the silver at my temples, the fire in my hair. I saw the woman who'd been humiliated at a restaurant table and the woman who now owned a business and a future. I saw pain, yes, but I also saw power. My mother's voice came back again, warm and stubborn. Angela, redheads are lucky. Maybe luck wasn't the money. Maybe luck wasn't Vegas or $10,000 or even Toby, though God knows I'm grateful for him. Maybe luck was this. The moment you realize you can lose a husband and still keep your life. You can lose a friend and still keep your dignity. You can be betrayed and still be the heroine of your own story. And if anyone ever tries to tell you you're too old to start over, tell them this. Tell them about a 64-year-old woman from New Jersey who got dumped at her favorite restaurant, poured champagne in a liar's face, took the divorce money, built a confectionery empire one mango tart at a time, found love when she wasn't looking, and watched the man who betrayed her discover the one thing he couldn't buy back. A woman like that doesn't need revenge. She is the lesson.